Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. It's Fran here and I'm back with a new video. Today's video is going to detail the best defenders for World Cup 22 Fantasy. And we'll be looking at specifically players who have been imported in the game. One thing I have to alert you guys is some players in the game currently have not been updated. We have players like Emilio Martinez from Argentina, Manuel Neuer from Germany who haven't been included in the game. At the same time, you have players like Kimpembe who won't be participating for the French national team. So do keep that in mind when you're looking for picks. The game hasn't fully updated yet. What I want to do from the outset is actually discuss the best fixtures from a defensive point of view. So this is a fixture difficulty rating almost from a defensive point of view. Green obviously being the best, yellow being the second best, orange being not very good, and then obviously red being a fixture where we don't really anticipate a clean sheet for either team. Or not either team, but specifically the team that's been selected here in the graphic. And Serbia, Switzerland, Cameroon, as you can see, for example, with Brazil, these are going to be the matchday 1, matchday 2, and matchday 3 teams that Brazil will face respectively. Brazil, for me, is still one of the top teams to actually pick, and that's simply because I think the quality of the squad is very high. Yes, Switzerland are a team very capable of scoring. We also have Serbia, too, that have a Mitrovic that hopefully could be included in the squad, but I do think he might not be included by matchday 1. So that's going to be a huge benefit and a boost for if you go for a Brazilian defender. You have players like Alisson who can be involved, and ultimately this Brazilian team, I would say, is still one of the most stacked teams on paper. So similar to France, for example, in the World Cup in the last time out, we can see that because of the strength of the squad, we probably do expect more clean sheets and a little bit more, I would say, concentration from this Brazilian team, even though they have quite easily given away clean sheets as of late. When we're talking about Argentina, I think they actually clearly have some of the best games next to England. Both these two teams have arguably 3 games in their groups where they can easily get clean sheets and also have defenders that will contribute to open play. This year in fantasy, you have defenders that can score goals and actually get you 7 points per goal, which is huge, whereas assists will only give you 3. And that might actually change your mind on whether you want to go for a center back or a fullback this year. I would say fullbacks are actually relatively well priced. And we've seen, of course, with the modern iteration of football that fullbacks are very, very capable of scoring goals. You'll see that with Cancelo as an example, even Joe Dalot lately for Portugal, even looking within the same team. And there's no necessary need, I would say, to go for center backs at this point in time, but Argentina and England are fantastic teams. France, Portugal, Netherlands, these are also teams with great games as well. Netherlands are quite an offensive team. They do still play within back 5, so that's quite a beneficial thing to look at. Qatar, of course, and Ecuador, I would say their attacking ceiling isn't particularly high. And you also have Senegal, who probably don't have Mane back. Mane is someone who might even be able to play only after the group stages based on his injury timeline. So that's a huge benefit for going for a Netherlands defender. And of course, we've talked about Dumfries as in my team selection. Uruguay is an interesting pick because a lot of the defenders are really, really poorly priced. At the same time, they have 2 great fixtures, very similar to Spain and Germany as well. Spain and Germany, unfortunately, have to face each other the same way that Uruguay and Portugal actually face each other. I do expect Portugal to have the better of Uruguay, but we'll see what happens because a lot of Uruguay players are actually in form, and this Portuguese team has still failed to live up to expectations under Santos as their manager. Belgium, I think, actually have a really good group stage. They have relatively easy teams with exception to Croatia to face. But from a defensive point of view, you have to look at how aged that backline is. The only really true good pick, I would say, is potentially the keeper in Courtois, or even someone like Vertonghen, who is actually 5 mil in the game, and a little bit cheaper than Courtois from that point of view. Otherwise, I would say one of the issues with Belgium is, even though they do play in a very nice back 5 structure, whether they can actually keep clean sheets versus some very high-octane teams like a Canada, or even a Croatia, who's very respectable as an international opponent, is up for debate. Germany is an interesting one, very similar to Spain. I think Japan and Costa Rica are both teams that can attack, but I don't think they really have enough to really muster versus Germany and Spain. Japan, of course, were a team that were very attacking in the previous World Cup, and we saw some great performances from them, but their squad has dramatically changed from then. We've also seen some defensive players mostly come out from Japan. Some other players who also play in the Bundesliga as well were quite interesting, but I would say this Japanese team is really still a mark below both Spain and Germany, and I do think that Spain specifically have better chance of getting clean sheets, which is why they're higher up on this list. Iran, Wales, these are teams that also play within the group with England. I think one of the tough things here is it's very hard to actually pick who's the best team here. USA is also not included in this list, but I would actually probably avoid all these players here. What it really points out to is how strong England's group is from a defensive point of view if you're picking English assets. Switzerland's is interesting because they actually have a really good fixture list where you have Cameroon first and then obviously a tough game in Brazil, and they're very similar to Ecuador where the matchday 1 is very easy to attack. So if you're looking for a strategy where you're going for, let's say, a matchday 2 wildcard, potentially you could employ a Swiss defender like a Ricardo Rodriguez, who could be a good punt. At the same time, you could probably see that he could maybe even be on penalties once again for the Swiss team. I'm not sure if that's actually going to be the case. Seferovic is obviously a player who is also capable of taking penalties, but we've seen a lot of penalty misses from Switzerland as of late, so that's going to be up for debate. Mexico is probably a team that I actually like to miss out on. I know a lot of us will probably remember the heroics of someone like Ochoa, and ultimately I think this Mexican team has gone on worse to worse. They have some decent attacking players in someone like a Irving Lozano who plays for Napoli, but other than that, I'm really not too fond of Mexico. I do like Poland though, because their players are really well priced, and if you look at the actual structure of the fixtures, they've got Mexico and Saudi Arabia first before they actually have to face the very, very tough team in their group, such as Argentina. So that's an interesting team to look at. Ecuador, as I mentioned, get to face a very, very easy opponent, Qatar, but you have to think about how tough the next two fixtures are for them. However, they have kept 5 clean sheets in their last international games. One thing I will also point out, though, is that they've been very, very poor from the attacking point of view. So there might not be so many rewards from the attacking end outside of going for someone like Estupinian, who's also on some set pieces for them. Croatia is an interesting punt. I think their defenders are also really, really cheap, and that actually is what makes them quite interesting, even though they're a little bit lower on this list when we talk about clean sheet probability. And Morocco here is probably also a team I'd like to avoid, similar to Poland, but because of Poland's matchups and how they're lined up, I do think there's a punt there with Matty Cash as well, and we'll talk about that as we move into the defenders. Starting with the defenders, we have the 3.5 player in Sosa, and what's interesting about Sosa is he could play most of the games for Croatia. I have been looking into the history of Croatia's games, and there are other options, of course, that they can employ in the left-back position. If you're concerned a little bit about the rotation proneness of Sosa, who has actually had a really good season in the Bundesliga, you could be looking at someone like Guardiola, who's right below at the 4.0 territory. I think he has the upside there of being a left-back player, and just at 3.5, such a steal to have in your draft. I really wouldn't pass up on that. Araujo is someone who is unfortunately training with Uruguay, but doesn't seem like he's ready to actually play some of the fixtures. There's even been rumors that Barcelona have agreed with Uruguay that he's not going to play in the group stages. Whether that's actually true, I think remains to be seen. I think he could potentially play as soon as the Portugal game if Uruguay really need him. But at the same time, he's really one to pass up, and there is a huge asterisk on him. So just stay tuned to the news on him to see if he's actually available before you even pick him for match day 1. He might just be an option for match day 3. As far as 4.0 options, you've got someone like Matty Cash here, who's fantastic. I think he's the best option in this price range because Mexico and Saudi Arabia are the first 2 games for Poland. And when you look at the scope of this group, Argentina being that 3rd game, it makes it really easy to actually get the full benefits of Matty Cash. He gets to play the easier fixtures here in match day 1, match day 2, is at a cut rate price, fills in a gap for this Poland team that really dearly missed a right back since Piszczek has left the team. And as I say, you can just simply move him out by the time he faces Argentina at match day 3. With Schär, you have someone from Switzerland who's also a little bit interesting. He's also another option that can be paired alongside Ricardo Rodriguez as well. And what's nice about Switzerland is they do have a lovely match day 1 game, but a terrible match day 2 game, and arguably also a really poor one from a defensive point of view match day 3. So I really wouldn't consider Schär too much. I think he's someone that I would probably pass up in my draft. I think Ricardo Rodriguez just has the upside because he might be a set piece taker. Schär, of course, is someone who takes a lot of long range shots, but whether that's actually going to bang, whether that's actually going to be at 7 points, whether you're going to get the full benefit of Schär in match day 1 specifically, really depends on whether you're going for a wildcard draft in match day 2. He might be one to think about if you are looking for a match day 1 draft and looking for budget. As far as 4.5 options, you've got Telles and Mela. I think Mela is actually the best option here. Telles has one of the rotation possibilities with Alexandro as the left back for Brazil. We have seen Alexandro play, I would say, 1/4 of the games, whereas Telles himself has been probably playing around the other 75%. And what's nice about Telles, of course, is you do play for this Brazilian team who we would expect to be the favorite of this tournament. Yes, of course, Switzerland and Serbia do seem to be tough matches on paper, but when you contextualize that with the Mitrovic injury, as I discussed, and also Switzerland probably being a step below this Brazilian team, then Telles actually playing the first 2 games could be very, very interesting, both in match day 1 and 2. And he's still at a very cheap price of 4.5. To get that access to the Brazilian defense, especially with a fullback who could find creative options, I do think there's a little bit of upside there. So Telles is quite interesting from that point of view. Mela, of course, is, I would say, the real deal, right? Because you have this France game in match day 2, which is very tough. But overall, once again, another steal from the perspective of having someone at 4.5, a very cheap price. Tunisia and Australia, both games where Denmark could easily get clean sheets. We've even seen Denmark get clean sheets in the past with France. Of course, made this a game where you probably would like to avoid, or just to signify the strength of this French attack. But there is still the chance that this Denmark team, as the dark horses that they have been in international tournaments in the last 2 times that we've seen them out, could really get a great result for France once again. We've seen that in the past before, where they have even drawn in the World Cup previous. So this is one of the contexts where I think Denmark could be very interesting, and Mæhle, of course, is the best pick to go for. He's actually one of the cheapest defenders. You have players like Anderson who are a little bit more expensive and really not worth looking into. And Stupinian is one of those options, as I say, where he has a fantastic match day one, very similar to some of the players from Switzerland, where they're playing Cameroon themselves. Here with Qatar, you have a team with Estupinian, as I said, who has gotten 5 clean sheets in a row, and you have that upside there. Ricardo Rodriguez, we have seen him as the penalty taker before. Probably one I'd like to avoid for now. I think Estupinian is probably a better punt versus Qatar, and Switzerland, I would say, are probably less of a defensive team than in Ecuador. 5.0, this is where we have some of the real gems, and Shaw and Trippier are exactly that with the English national team. I'm expecting them to actually play the first 2 matches here as both left back and right back for this English team, playing in a back 5 structure. Of course, a lot of people might even think that England could move into a back 4, but I don't really think that actually changes the way Shaw and Trippier play. We've seen them both play within back 4s and back 5s at a club level, so there's nothing really that's going to substantially change for their roles with the national team. Trent Alexander-Arnold is clearly the less preferred right back, so I think Trippier can easily start the first 2 games so that England can actually get pole position in this group, and the same goes for Shaw as well. Trippier is actually someone who can cover in the left back position, whereas England are actually rather light when it comes to left backs, and we have seen both of them do rather well from club levels. Trippier specifically with Newcastle. If you've been an FPL player, you'll know he's been an absolute rock in FPL, whereas Shaw is someone who's found a little bit of form since the Manchester derby and has gotten a starting position back in the team. But simply put, when you look at international play, has been the preferred left back for Southgate for a long, long time, and has also scored very recently. Vertonghen is someone you might want to consider alongside Otamendi as the centre backs here for top teams who have great fixtures. Both Belgium and Argentina, as we discussed with the clean sheets and the fixture difficulty, have great opportunities here. Croatia being the one tough game, I would say, for Belgium, outside of the kind of 6 here between Otamendi and Vertonghen, which moves Vertonghen into that second tier. Otamendi, though, as a 5.0 player for Argentina, might be cheaper actually than his compatriot in Martinez, who's going to be a keeper in the game. Unfortunately, Martinez has not been included, so I won't be discussing the keepers for this video because I really think the game is very, very light when it comes to keepers at this point in time. Otamendi, though, as I say, is going to be playing defensively for one of the teams that we expect to get the most clean sheets in the group stages. When you look at Brazil, they do have one tough match, arguably, versus Switzerland, whereas Argentina here, there's possibilities here to get 3 clean sheets, so Otamendi's a lovely pick. Vertonghen as well, similar situation where he's going to probably play most of the games for Belgium. They just don't have enough centre-back depth, and we have seen him play consistently for Belgium, and he's a little bit cheaper than Alderweireld, who, of course, might be a little bit more of an attacking threat. But Vertonghen at 5.0, a little bit cheaper than Courtois, of course, 1 million cheaper than Courtois, might be interesting here at this price point. Alphonso Davies is the one differential in this draft. I would not consider him really for matchday 1 for Belgium, but I think he's absolutely an option to gamble upon for matchday 2 and matchday 3. First of all, Canada, I think, is a little bit of an underrated team because they have had a fantastic run in their own continent in qualification as well. They've been a really good attacking side. He's one of the set-piece takers, the penalty taker for Canada as well, and we've seen him, of course, play mostly in the attacking positions for this Canadian national team. So he is going to be one of those out-of-position players in this draft here where you can clearly glean from a little bit of the attacking dividends from him as a player and benefit from that in matchday 2, matchday 3. I'd definitely think about transferring him then as opposed to starting him versus Belgium. At 5.5, you're looking here for players who are playing for both Argentina and Belgium, Argentina, Brazil, and England. You have Marquinhos, Tagliafico here, Maguire, and Stones. Maguire and Stones are a little bit different to Trippier and Shaw, where I think they will be the nailed partnership alongside another third centre-back, whoever that is from Gareth Southgate's choice. These 2 players are both set-piece threats. We've seen that on a club level as well as domestically and or internationally as well in the previous Euros, where both Stones and Maguire were very consistent when it comes to set-piece creation chances. This English national team is also very huge, and they employ 5 defensive players that can all quite reasonably provide from a set-piece point of view. So Shaw and Trippier are both fantastic on the corners, Maguire and Stones both great at actually scoring them, and of course with the 7 points earned for goals scored, Maguire and Stones will be quite interesting. And I think the same goes for someone like Marquinhos, who's been fantastic very consistently for PSG and Brazil in scoring set pieces. Of course, you have Thiago Silva and potentially even Eder Militao, who could be a bench player or a right back sort of rotation option too for Brazil, who can chip in there. But Marquinhos is a nailed starter for Brazil, a little bit cheaper than Thiago Silva, and therefore probably worth including your draft ahead of Thiago Silva. Tagliafico is going to be the left back for Argentina. That's quite interesting, of course, to get an attacking player for Argentina. One thing I will say from watching Argentina, I was watching them play versus Italy in that kind of winner of the Euro versus winner of the Copa America game in London. And actually, they play a very flat defensive line. I don't think Tagliafico actually pushes very high forward, so he doesn't really have the sort of attacking role that most fullbacks do. But at the same time, we have Argentina with great chances of getting clean sheets, and potentially you might have a little bit more potential to get something like an assist from a Tagliafico as opposed to a Otamendi. At 6.0, we have once again some true gems. I think 5.5 is probably a category that you can skip. 5.0, you have some great gems, and there's no real need to really push up to 5.5. Whereas at 6.0, you have players like Cancelo and Dumfries. Of course, with Dumfries, you have the news that he seemed to have succumbed to an injury, but I think the actual update is that it was quite positive, and he might really start for match day 1. He seems fit and ready to go based on the latest news that we have possible. So, of course, do stay on track with that. That's why the asterisk is there, but he does seem to be one of the absolute best picks. They don't really have a tough fixture whatsoever, specifically when you look at the blunt edge that is Senegal with Mane out, Ecuador themselves being very blunt, and then also Qatar being a team that is considerably one of the worst teams in the tournament. When you look at the strength of their international ranking and the results that they've attained so far. So this is a great opportunity for Dumfries to showcase what he has brought to the table on attack many times before, specifically in the Euros where he was a fantastic asset to own. And just simply because this Netherlands team is a step above their opposition, quite easily we can probably glean an opportunity to get maybe 1 or 2 clean sheets, which will be a huge benefit having a player like Dumfries. Cancelo is someone who has attacked a lot both on Man City and also Portugal as of late. We have seen the fullbacks utilized a little bit more for this Portuguese national team, and Cancelo, of course, is the nailed option here. He can play both left back and right back, and that's the main difference here. Players like Rafael Guerrero, Joe Dalot, and Nuno Mendes, who don't often play or are nailed in this national team setup, whereas Cancelo can flexibly play between both and provides you both an attacking edge when he plays both left back and right back. And I think that's the huge benefit that we have here going for Cancelo. Whether you actually want to go for a extremely expensive defense is up to you. You have a lot of budget options across the field, including the midfield and forward positions. Of course, a lot of people will probably look towards captaincy options within the forward positions, which means that some of the money has to be stripped away from the midfield and defense. But you have great options here with Cancelo and Dumfries. You could double up on both or simply just go for one of the two. Alba and Carvajal are other options to think about. I really wouldn't contemplate going for Spain because they have that tough match versus Germany. And then also with Alba, you have the potential rotation throughout the Gaia. Carvajal could be the same because he was recently semi-injured, I would say, in the Real Madrid match versus Cadiz, and you might not really know the full evaluation of that injury and maybe whether Azpilicueta might need to step in or even if someone else can play in that position for that Spanish national team setup. And that's going to be the defenders tier list so far. I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. Hopefully we get some other picks updated in the game, and we get some goalkeepers as well that can actually make us consider whether it's worth it to go for some defenders. Because what you like to have actually is make sure that you have coverage of different teams as much as possible that you think will do well. Of course, you could double up on some options. I think England is a great team to double up on because Shaw and Trippier are so well priced. But I also value a lot of flexibility and diversity at times with our team selections, especially in the group stages, particularly when results don't actually go always to plan, and that kind of diversity is very much appreciated. So thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next